Welcome to Sleep Journeys. Tonight, we travel far back in time, to the heart of ancient Rome, where sand, sweat, and steel shaped legends. You are a gladiator, one of many, and now we'll explore what a day in your life might have looked like. Let the world fall away, and let the story guide you to sleep. Before we begin, if these journeys bring you peace and joy, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It helps me continue creating new stories for the nights ahead. Now, close your eyes and imagine. You wake before the sun in the gloom of your stone cell. The straw mattress crackles beneath you, a brittle echo in the hour when even the rats seem to rest. Above, the torch gutters in its iron bracket, spitting shadows onto limestone walls, painting the illusion of a crowd. You lie there, still as a corpse, listening to the slow drip of water from some forgotten, cracked pot, counting the seconds between each plink. The seeping damp has curled the hairs on your arms and left your skin puckered, as if you are already half pickled for the afterlife. You swing your legs from the cot, brush straw from your shins, and shiver. The bruises from yesterday's training have set in, yellow and purple, like garlands from a festival thrown by madmen. You rub absently at your left thigh, where Ariston's wooden blade caught you. He'd laughed then, a short barking laugh that suggested too much joy in the pain of others. And Lanista had waded in to separate you before things could go too far. The old man takes his role seriously, and the Ludus, our training ground, is his world entire. There is a scuffle from the next cell, a grunt and a curse in Ligurian. Probably Cato, still dreaming of the sheepfolds he left behind, cursing the gods for making him too broad of shoulder and too slow to run. You wonder if he has noticed the pattern yet, how in this place strength is never hidden. The weak die, the strong die more slowly, and those in between watch and wait, hoping to be neither. Your mouth tastes of blood and tin, your tongue a fat worm in the morning. You run your hand over your scalp, stubbled and tender, and press the heel of your palm against your forehead until the ache ebbs. The cell is small enough that a single stride takes you from cot to door, from yesterday into today, which will be like yesterday, and worse. Overhead, someone drags a bucket across the walkway, and a bloom of briny slop filters through the bars. Breakfast, by the smell of it. You flex your hands, remembering the tremor that crept in the day before, after you'd parried a dozen bruising strikes from the young Greek. Today, you'll be tested again. Muscle and bone, and something else that lives deep in the chest. You've learned how to ignore the quiver, to pace your breath and slow your heart, but you know the tremor will betray you soon enough. You know because you've seen it in others, the way the strong become brittle, the way the crowd hungers for the first break. They'll call it fate or the will of Mars, but you know it's no god at all, just the slow, inevitable rot of men in cages. Lanista slides the bolt, opens the door with a squeal that draws wincers up and down the corridor. You move as you're meant to, obeying the choreography of morning. You nod to Lanista. He squints at you, measuring your limp, the set of your jaw, the calculation that has replaced hope in your eyes. You know he is deciding, even now, whether to place you in the left or right pairing, whether you'll be the bait or the beast. The others are already gathering. Cato, eyes red-rimmed, his vast hands wringing at nothing. Little Lucius, clutching the wooden tablet he sleeps with, the corners gnawed to pulp. You join the shuffle, single file, feet slapping wetly in the puddled corridor. At the mouth of the hall, the ceiling opens upward, revealing a rectangle of grey, dawnless sky over the sanded yard. Someone, probably one of the kitchen boys, has laid out a row of chipped bowls. The porridge inside is the same every morning, pale, gruel thin, with the skin cooled over from the night before. Next to it, a blunt slab of goat cheese, already sweating, and a handful of split figs, their insides glistening like tiny wounds. You take your seat on a bench that remembers every man who ever sat upon it. The wood is dark with decades of sweat and oil, and as you lower yourself, you sense the company of ghosts, men who ate here before you. The others eat quickly, shoveling with hands and fingers, but you pace yourself, chewing each mouthful, letting the grains soften in your jaw. It is a small rebellion, this slowness. an assertion that you are not yet only an animal. A low murmur drifts among the men, like wind sifting reeds at the riverbank. Lucius mouths words over his food, lips moving in prayer that has no sound and less conviction. Cato laughs at nothing, a thick, joyless chuff that gathers no response. You offer a nod to Gaius, his face split by a fresh dash, lips puffed violet, but he only raises his bowl in solemn salute, draining the dregs with a practiced tilt. Across the yard, Ariston flicks a fig pit at a passing fly, then grins when he misses and Lanista's gaze lances him from the shade. A kitchen slave, thin as a reed and just as bowed, moves down the line with a battered amphora, sloshing watered wine into each cup. When he reaches you, you hold your vessel steady. The wine is the color of dirty rubies, the kind that stains the tongue for hours after, but you accept it as though it were nectar. You catch the slave's eye, see the hollow hunger in him, and nod once in thanks. He flinches, almost drops the jug, then scurries away. With the food gone and bowls stacked, Lanista barks the morning's orders, his voice cracking the chill like a whip. The men rise, slow from the ache of old wounds, and file out to the sand. Now, the real day begins. The armory yawns open at the end of the yard, a cave of iron and sweat. In the threshold, the armorer waits, tapping a tally stick against his palm. His tunic is wine-stained, and his bald head shines with a crust of sweat, but he holds each man's gaze as if he is emperor of this little world. You nod, barely, and move on, but Ariston lingers. An oily word or two, a wink, the kind of banter that only matters when there is nothing to lose. Inside, the racks stand in military rows. Swords, a dozen different shapes and tempers. Helmets with scarred cheek plates. Heaps of leather armor still damp from yesterday's wash. You find your shelf, your name, scratched in a slave's hand, still visible on the iron plaque. The gladiator waits, it is dulled. You heft it, balancing the weight, and let the memory of its heft settle down your arm. The leather carapace hangs, stitched and buckled, its edges furred from years of second skins. You slip it over your shoulders and cinch the straps until your lungs protest. The helmet, cold and close with the stink of last week's sweat, seals over your head. The world narrows to a slit, everything rimmed in brass. Your breath echoes in the bowl, amplifying every rasp, every swallow. A clumsy hand at first, then a practiced adjustment. Chin strap, cheek plates, the cage for your own face. At the back of the armory, the armorer's voice rises again, herding the laggards. You can hear him berating Lucius for the way he straps his helmet, for the slouch in his stance. The old man preaches that a true gladiator makes every act a ritual, that there is honor in even the most futile gesture. But you have already seen honor bleed out here, dry up like a cut flower in the heat. Still, you do as he taught you. You tighten the leather at your wrist not once but twice. You adjust the chin band so the helmet will not spin at the first blow. In the corner, Lanista watches, arms folded, a chiseled sneer compressing his whole life into a single line above the lip. He paces down the row, lingers at Ariston's helm, tilts it, thumps the crown with 2 fingers, checking for cracks or cowardice. Moves on to you. He lifts your chin with the end of the tally stick, inspects your eyes as if verifying the gold in a coin. Strong today? He asks, but it's not a question. Stronger, you answer, and the word comes out metallic, armored by the helmet. He nods, once, then raps your chest plate twice, the sign to move forward. You file into the yard with the others, the sun barely risen enough to cut through the mist. Sand cakes your sandals, gritty with last week's sweat and blood, unearthed and churned by dozens of shuffled drills. The yard is ringed by a low wall, beyond which the city awakens, vendors shouting, dogs barking, the distant quarrel of neighbors. Lanista lines you shoulder to shoulder, a row of battered arms and wary faces. He barks the first command, and the line shuffles into motion. A dozen mismatched feet, gouging trenches in the dirt. You fall into the rhythm, left foot forward, gladius high, shield set. The first lap is always for show. Lanista watching, Rodsman ready with his switch for the slackers. You know the pattern, the way he circles with hands clasped behind his back, the way his one good eye never blinks. The drill changes. Now you step and turn, pivot on the heel, slash and recover. Shields raised, gladii flickering. The line ripples in imperfect unison. Ariston next to you counts under his breath, marking time, but his strikes lad. The old bravado gone soft with fatigue. You adjust, sharpen your pace, fill the space he leaves. It is the only kindness allowed here, covering your brother's weakness until it threatens your own. Dust climbs in the morning, a pale fog that clings to sweat and gums the lips. The sun, when it finally breaks the rim of the wall, is a coin pressed into your vision, blinding and cold at once. Hours go by, time for sparing. Lemista splits the line, calling pairs. The men fan out onto the sand, circling, measuring, their movements sharp and automatic as a line of ants. So many hours spent mapping these same dusty circles, the motions as ingrained as breath. You face Ariston first, and though his grin is gone, he moves with a loose arrogance, twirling his wooden blade as if it were a reed. Lanista shouts the drill. Advance, pivot, strike, retreat, block, recover. And you step in, shield high, feeling the damp jewel burn off as blood moves in your limbs. Ariston's first cut is lazy, but you know better than to meet it head on. Instead, you let the blow glance off your shield's rim, the jolt racing through your arm, and step in with a low sweep that catches him at the knee. He grunts, not in pain, but in respect. This is the only currency here. Behind you, Gaius and Cato huff and clatter, their dulled swords smacking arm and shield with a sound like wet branches breaking. Lucius, unsteady, drops his guard and takes a jab to the belly. He doubles, then straightens, face set in the stubborn mask you know too well. Ariston recovers first, jaw clenched, and smashes the flat of his blade into your left shoulder with a force that rattles your teeth. You absorb it, let the pain register and pass. Your riposte is measured, a half step back, then a tight jab that dings his breastplate and leaves a round welt beneath the leather. Lanista barks for more realism, and Ariston whirls his sword overhead, feints, and slaps the rim of your helmet so hard your ears ring. You see red. Not anger, but the flush of adrenaline, the taste of iron. You answer with a twist of your hips, shield pressing into his chest, and drive him off bounds. The dance quickens. Blow, block, sidestep, advance. 7 exchanges, maybe 8, each a fraction faster than the last, until you both gasp for air, and sweat drips from the nape of your neck into the hollow of your spine. Again. Lanista commands, and Ariston lunges. You read him this time, parry high, step inside his reach, and thud the pommel of your practiced sword against his ribs. He drops with a curse, more surprise than pain, and Lanista paces over, eyes gleaming with grim satisfaction. He calls end, his hand slicing the air. Long break before afternoon training. You lower your weapons, chest heaving steam in the morning cold, and Ariston flashes a wolfish grin. Getting slow, he says, but he rubs his ribs as he speaks, a faint tremor in his fingers. The numbness in your arm is seeping down, mitting the flesh to leather, and you know come tomorrow it will ache like an old debt. The release from the sand is sudden, the world too bright as you step from the grit and echo of the ring. The tunnel is cool, slicing the sun's bite from your skin, and for a moment you allow yourself to collapse into the slouch that would earn a rebuke out on the yard. Ariston falls in beside you, his cheap bravado leaking away with each limping step. Behind you, Cato and Lucius shuffle in lockstep, wounded, proud, indistinguishable from yesterday's line and tomorrow's. The bards are set at the far side of the compound, beyond the kitchens and the magistrate's garden, where even the roses grow angry and red. By the time you reach the stone archway, the trembling in your shoulders has calcified into fatigue, and every step up the shallow marble stairs is a negotiation with pain. The bath slaves scuttle ahead, their bare feet silent on tile, drawing water from the brass-plated cauldron and tossing in oils that bubble thick and slow. The steam rises in veils, softening the edges of the world. Inside, the echo chamber of the baths swallows the day's noises. The clatter of practiced swords, the grunts and insults, all dissolve in the hiss and trickle of water. It smells of dung, lavender, and men's sweat. You strip down, wriggling out of the leather and linen. Your skin steams, each scratch already darkening to tomorrow's bruise. Cato is the first to the water trough, plunging his face and arms with a bellow like a drowning ox. Lucius tips the bucket over his head, shivering and beating his chest. And for a second, you remember the river, the one that split your village, how the women would haul water with their skirts hitched, their laughter echoing off the stones. You sink into the water, hot enough to sting, and the crust of dried sweat and caked-on sand lifts from your skin in pale, sickly clouds. The copper tang of blood, both yours and not, fades beneath the lavender oil, and for a moment you can pretend the world is less brutal than you know it to be. Ariston wades in after, his knuckles raw, and sets to scouring his forearms with a bronze basin, the clatter ringing through the steam like distant bells. The others move in, silent now, the day's violence exchanged for a kind of fragile truce. A bath-hyphen slave approaches, his hands delicate as a girl's, and offers you a fresh strigil. You take it and rake the blunt edge down your calf, watching the filth and dead skin curl away. The pain in your leg has dulled to a steady throb, but the heat soothes it, draws it out in a clean, animal way. You close your eyes and let your head rest against the tile, breathing in the wet, heavy air. Beyond the veil of steam, the compound's daily machinery grinds on. The clang of a hammer from the armory, the sharp crow of the Lannister summoning a scribe, the hiss of the kitchen fire catching the whole pig's skin. The heat works its slow magic. You feel your calves and thighs uncoil, the knots behind your shoulders slacken. Your pulse, which is hammered since the yard, softens to a dull, tidal thrum. Above, the domed ceiling is painted with fragments of some heroic myth, Perseus perhaps, or Aeneas, but the faces have faded, eyes puddled into formless shadows. You're halfway between waking and sleep when a new shadow interrupts the bath's haze. A figure in a white tunic, belted with red, moves through the steam with a gait that's almost priestly. The other men, unused to visitors in this sanctum, slide aside with the wary respect reserved for creatures who hold tremendous recognition. He stops at the edge of the pool, sandals squelching against the wet tile, and raises a hand in silent greeting. His hair is plaited back from his temples, and his face, shaven close, is scored with old knife marks. You recognize him, Valens, the healer. Not a physician of the city, but an expert of hurts far more subtle and local. Rumor said he'd been a gladiator once, before a spear stole the use of his left hand. Now he's stitched, dosed, bled, and bantered as if medicine lived not in scrolls, but in the learned give and taken by the fight itself. You are the first one he approaches. He uncorks a pot of something that smells of pine pitch and honey, and with no warning, he presses it into the bruised meat of your shoulder. The burn is sodden, a white spike, but you hold fast, only the twitch at your jaw betraying the pain. He works the salve in small circular motions, thumb digging, as if she could knead out the trauma with sheer will. Good cut, he says, nodding at the crescent on your biceps where Ariston caught you. Not deep, won't scar. He says this as if to comfort, but you hear the faint register of disappointment. A man's biography written in scar tissue. Yours is not yet worth reading. He patches you with brisk efficiency, then moves on, to Ariston's forearm, where a splinter of old wood festers black. As if the pain gives him new spine, Valens leaves a trail of pungent salve and comfortless optimism, winding through the bath like some minor god of bodily repairs. Otherwise, silence hangs between men here, broken only by dripping water and murmured Latin blessings. The lulls are heavy, each man bent into himself, working over his own tally of failures and triumphs in the dirt. Cato traces lines in the film on the water's surface, counting something only he knows. Lucius prays again, this time aloud, but the words are for his mother, not the gods. Ariston donks under, then emerges, face gone slack, all bravado melted into boyish fatigue. You remember suddenly, the first time you entered this bath after your capture, how the same oily steam seemed like a fog bank, how every word spoken by the others felt like code, an inscrutable language built from years of pain. Back then, you'd kept to the edge, watching, learning. This time, when the bath's empty, and you towel yourself dry with a threadbare strip of linen, you feel only the ache in your arms, as if the water has sluiced away every other thought. The world outside is too bright, the glare off the yard a white sword in your eyes, but you trudge across it in a daze of exhaustion. The mess hall is cool, shaded by a trellis of sun-rotted grapevines, with the breeze off the sea carrying the musk of salt and the promise of winter. The benches are long, the tables scored with old knife gouges and burn scars, and already some of the others have collapsed into the easy sprawl of men who know they have hours until the next summons. Bowls of slow-roasted lentils, fat with garlic, slicked with yesterday's oil steam, at the center of the table. The kitchen slaves bring rounds of rough barley bread, its crust blackened, but the wheat inside still sweet. You break it open, feeling the heat against your fingers, and mop up the broth. The taste is plain but alive, and the first swallow settles in your stomach like a stone of comfort. Cato eats with the animal focus of a man who has been hungry for most of his life. No talking, just the rhythm of hand to mouth, interrupted only by the occasional grunt of appreciation. Ariston, ever the peacock, smears the lentils on his bread with delicate precision, as if imitation of the patricians might one day lift him from this life. Lucius leaves the best for last, arranging olives, cheese, and bread into perfect thirds, then eating each with ceremonial gravity. You watch the others, impersonating hunger until its reality returns, and you begin to eat with honest appetite, letting the food fill the blank spaces hollowed out by the morning's violence. After the meal, you drift to the edge of the compound, where the sun has slumped toward the ragged line of rooftops. The air stings more than it burns now, sweet with impending cold. On the wall overlooking the city, you climb to your usual perch, careful of the slick stones. There is a fissure in the mortar, wide enough to hold your heel, a ledge just deep enough to sit with knees hugged to chest. From here, you can see the most of the city. You sit most of the day. The drills are not until the hour when the light grows mean, and the sand is hot enough to sting bare feet. So you nestle into the wall, legs folded, and let your mind drift. Sometimes, a kitchen slave will smuggle a bruised plum or a fold of honeyed nutcakes to you, a peace offering for some remembered kindness. You eat in silence, lips sticky, and watch the city heave and churn. You look for the amphitheater, your future arena, but it is hidden behind the humped backs of the city's domes. All you receive is a sprawl of rooftops, laundry lines, broken statuary. Sometimes the wind brings you the sound of traders haggling over fish, or the far-off bellow of a priest calling the faithful to temple. There are women walking in pairs, faces veiled and eyes sharp, and children darting beneath wagon axles, playing games you can't remember the rules to. It's the kind of city you know you'll never belong to, even if you live to see its 1,000 gates. You clutch at the stone beneath you, feeling its chill even with the sun on your skin, and pull a fragment of bread from your sleeve. You eat it slowly, letting each bite linger as if it contains the memory of a meal from your real life. There are moments, especially after a meal and before the next round of drills, when it is possible to believe you are only resting between harvests. In those brief lapses, your mind drifts back to the valley, to the pulse of the river, the tang of horse sweat, and the rough hands of your father on your head. You remember the way he'd laugh, like splitting wood, and the way your mother's singing could be heard even when she was miles down in the barley fields. They are ghosts to you now, but the kind of ghosts that haunt in daylight, not dreams. Once, you catch yourself humming one of her songs, lips barely parted, the notes a thread of memory in the sun. There is a warmth to the sound, a secret pride to the way you remember every bar even now. When a shadow falls across you, you snap shut like an animal. Old muscle memory, the kind that keeps things alive. It's just Lucius, knees knobby and hair still streaming with bath water, balancing awkwardly on the ledge. He doesn't speak, just slips beside you, his breath quick from the climb. His eyes are wide, always a little too wide, as if the world is a place that can still surprise him, but he keeps them on the horizon, not on you. Together, you share the silence. The bird chatter from the olive groves below, the coil of smoke from the slave quarters rising slow and lazy. "Lanista requests us," he says finally. "He is by the shrine." You know exactly what it means. Tomorrow, you fight. You drop from the ledge in one smooth motion, landing beside Lucius. The descent jars your bruises, but you keep your face neutral. In the Ludus, weakness is a thing to be spent only in private, never in front of the pack. Lucius blinks at you, his mouth working as if to ask something, but then he just falls in step beside you, silent as a shadow. The shrine is tucked under the eaves near the grain stores, a mockery of sanctity in a place designed for violence. The god's face, carved from olive wood, has been worn smooth by 1,000 pleading hands. Lanista stands before it, his chalky tunic clean for once, the red border crisp as a wound. His expression is unreadable, the eyes too ancient for anger, too clever for pity. He waits until you and the others gather, then gestures you forward. Not with his hand, but with the faintest tilt of his head, as if even the act of summoning is a burden he'd rather not carry. You join the semicircle forming around the shrine. Ariston is there, hair still damp, jaw clenched as if the only way to keep his courage inside is to grind it between his teeth. Cato, heavy-shouldered and sheepish, and one of the newer arrivals, a Thracian with the look of a cornered dwarf. "We have games," he says. The words drop like stones. Not the little ones. Colosseum. Ariston grins, then hides it, jaw set. Cato's lips work soundlessly, as if trying to conjure protest but finding none. The Thracian only stares, eyes fixed on the half-melted idol at the center of the shrine, as if it might blink back. Lanista's instructions are so spare as to seem unnecessary. Eat well, sleep early, polish your kit. He says nothing else. He leaves you there, the four of you, to stare at the idol, which smells of the pressed oil and the sour reek of old prayers. Ariston is the first to break formation, rubbing at the nape of his neck, eyes darting like wasps. The others drift off in slow, reluctant pairs, as if afraid that some invocation will pin them to the spot. You stay an extra moment, watching the curve of shadow behind the aisle, and touch it, out of obligation, not faith. The wood is oily, and for an instant you feel as if 1,000 other hands are touching you back. As tomorrow is a fight day, there is no afternoon drill. The silence is a luxury. The men scatter, each to his own ritual, some to the stables, to barter for a stolen smoke of poppy, or a whispered word from the horseboys. Others to the kitchen. You do not return to the walls or the sun. Instead, with a sense of ceremony, you make for the workshop. The hut sits half buried in the yard's far corner, its thatch low and dark, its stones crusted in old blood. Inside, the air is rich with oil and iron filings. The racks are hung with tools, the benches littered with spent whetstones and scraps of hide. You take a rag and begin to wipe down your gladiators. You dip the rag in oil, working it into the blade with a lover's patience, tracing the shallow notches and stains, memory of each clash. The blade, when you slide it from its sheath, is mottled with morning's sweat and last week's rust. You place its edge against the whetstone, listening for the bite, the clean whisper that means you're doing it right. The motion is steady, deliberate. Not a rhythm, but a kind of careful violence, as if you are whittling away every moment that brought you here. The oil seeps into your hands, slick and dark, and the whetstone leaves a scent like rain on dry earth. Each pass refines the edge. Each pass reminds you this is not ceremony, but survival. When the gladius catches in the groove of your thumb, drawing a bead of blood, you nod in satisfaction and wipe the blade clean. You turn next to the helmet, the old bronze dimpled with 1,000 tiny impacts. Some are your own, some borrowed from the line of men who wore this bowl before you. You polish it with a rag, working the grease into every dent and ridge, and as the light shifts outside the small window, the metal comes alive, reflecting slivers of the dying sun. It's a good helmet, heavy, but it never failed you. You wonder how many blows it will fend off tomorrow, and how many will slip through the seams. For a while, your thoughts untangle, not about the arena or the men you'll face, but the finer details. How to keep sandals from splitting at the seam, how to oil the chin strap so it won't bite. How to pack linen in the crook of your elbow to catch the sweat before it swamps your grip. You are elbow deep in the toolkit when the door opens on a gust of cold alley air. The courier appears in the gap, a boy in a purple bordered tunic, hunched and shivering beneath the weight of his own importance. He holds a wax tablet in one hand, the other gripping a coin pouch with the stiffness of a man holding a live rat. The boy does not look at you, instead focusing on the wall behind your shoulder as he recites from memory, "For my majestic champion, from the office of Domina Valeria, House of Serranus, the ladies' guests are most eager for your next performance. Enclosed, an advance for extra rations and a caution against injury, as well as for your sweat. The lady prefers her champion's whole. Attend to your health and to the boy who will carry your armaments tomorrow morning. Give us a show tomorrow, but do survive the games." He places the pouch on the workbench and sets the tablet beside it, with a thump that suggests finality. The script is neat, each letter pressed with the patience of someone who expects nothing less than eternity. The wax holds a dent where the stylus bit too deep on your name. You have heard of Domina Valeria, though never spoken to her. The House of Serranus is old enough to have survived every riot and famine the city could hurl. Your previous owners, if memory served, hadn't lasted 2 winters before she bought out your contract, paying in denarii and favour and a case of strong Sicilian vigour. You have never once met her face to face, but you know her by proxy. Her gifts always calculated, her motives always a layer or two beneath what passed for kindness. The boy waits for a nod or a dismissal, but you simply wave him off and watch the purple hem vanish in the dusk. The little pouch is clumsy with coin, and you know enough to check it. 3, 6, 9 sesterces, and a flat disc of gold pressed thin as bark. You roll it on the table and catch the shimmer. The coin is stamped with the house sigil, a wasp, stinger out. You pocket the coin and the sesterces, wipe your hands, and return back to the common room. The lamps are lit early in the common room, a dozen tallow tapers jammed into bottles, and the warped necks of amphorae. Smoke hangs just below the ceiling, and every face glows with the feverish energy of men who know tomorrow is not promised. In the warm stink of sweat and wine in expectation, the normal decorum collapses. Men squat in tight knots over dice cups, the clatter filling the stone box like hail, each bet punctuated by curses in languages you never learned in the daylight. Lucius, usually silent, now gambles with the obsessive energy of a child building a wall against the dark. In a corner, Cato and the Thracian drink from a shared bowl, arms draped over each other's shoulders, their laughter thick and untranslatable. Ariston, never one to keep to the background, stands on the bench and demands attention with a clapped rhythm, his battered tin cup serving as both drum and scepter. The song he sings is in Greek, a bawdy tune about a fisherman's daughter and the soldier who mistook her for a goddess. It's a story that twists and turns, and he paces the room as he sings, gesturing with wild sweeps of his arms, voice crescendoing at every crude punchline. You find the fire in the corner, low and flickering, better for smoke than for warmth. The heat reminds you of the kill at home, how your father would curse under his breath when the wind blew the wrong way and stoked the flames toward the house. You sit, elbows on knees, and let your eyes blur out the room. Men, shadow, flame, the creeping edge of night. A boy, he is a boy, still, even if he wears the cut of a man, slides onto the bench beside you. He is new, or new enough that his skin still looks tight, and his hands haven't gone cowsed from the grip of sword and shield. He offers you a cup, the rim chipped so badly it could open a lip if you're not careful. The wine inside is thin, more water than grape, but the gesture is real. You take it, nod once, and wait. He speaks like a kid who's practiced the lines 100 times in his head. "Tell me about your first fight," he says. When you were new." He glances at the fire, as if it will judge the question. You swallow, tasting the brine and the ghost of vinegar. The room quiets around you, not out of respect, but for the hunger to hear another man's story, one that might be worse than their own. You remember, though you try not to. It was a night fight, you say, voice slow. Torch lit, the crowd wanted a show. You can still feel the press of the helmet, the stink of old men. The sand was black with spilled oil, and somewhere above, the crowd stamped their feet in time with the death chant, pounding out a rhythm that was part thunder, part threat. Your opponent had been called Achilles, a veteran, a man rumored to have killed for coin even before the game's ever to name. You don't mention that you were still learning the shape of your own hands, that the gladius felt like a length of cold bone in your fist. He was older than I was. He came in fast, tried to drive me to the wall. Hit me here. You tap your hip with the rim of the cup, and I stayed on my feet out of habit, not courage. We circled. He laughed as he fought. You watched the young man's eyes, wide and unblinking. He laughed again when I fell, and now you let your lips twitch, no trace of nostalgia. He was confident, so he came to close. My blade reached his foot. He fell. I got up. He couldn't. I didn't kill him, but I broke something important, and he did not stand again. So I won. The boy is silent. The others nod. The way men do when a story is not quite what they hoped, but they know the rules about the dead. You do not speak ill, nor embellish beyond a bruise. There is a ripple of laughter, as Ariston, sensing the solemnity, belts out the chorus to his song, yanking the room back into its natural chaos. By nightfall, the revelry has worn itself into a slow, sodden drag. The men thin out from the common room, peeling off in twos and threes, some to the outer sheds with their contraband, others to their cots. The air sours as the fire gutters low, and for a while you sit alone, slumped, eyelids sinking. The lull after the wine and stories is thick as sleep itself, and in the quiet your body remembers how tired it is. You rise, stretching the ache from your neck, then slip from the common room. There is no one in the corridor but the shadows. At your door, you tap 3 times. Habit, not need, but you do it anyway. Your cell is colder than you remember, the walls slicked with a fine sweat that seeps from the stone itself. You undress with care, folding the tunic as if it was silk and not the same scratchy wool issued to convicts and cattlemen. Your sandals, still dusted with the grit of the yard, you set beside the door. You lie down, arms folded across your chest, and let the silence swallow you whole. You stare up, watching the ceiling bloom into patterns as your eyes adjust. There is a patch of black mold, no larger than a thumbnail, but in the dusk it resembles a continent or an island, and you trace its shape with your gaze. You imagine walking the perimeter of that country, the marshes and coasts, the mountain rising in the center. Only when the silence becomes unbearable do you let your mind wander. You think of tomorrow, of the arena, not the sand or blood or crowd, but the exact moment when the gate will open and you will walk out, naked but for your armor, into the wall of sound. For those few seconds, you will belong to no one, not Lanista, not Valeria, not the city or its howling mob. You will be more free than you have ever been, terrifyingly so, untethered by every rule of the yard, a man unowned. You think, too, of the other side of the gate, the moment after, if it comes, when you are still standing and the world has not yet decided if you are man or monster or memory. The city will scream for you or forget you, but either way you will return here, to this cot, these walls, this honest dark. There is, beneath the fatigue, a pulse of something else. Not hope exactly, but the raw ache of possibility. The idea that one day you might walk out and not come back, that the gates could open in another direction. The rumors always circle, that a champion who survives long enough earns his freedom, that a benefactor might buy your contract for a princeling's ransom. You have heard these stories, seen the men grow gaunt with wanting them to be true. You have never believed, but tonight the idea nibbles at your mind. You wonder, in the dark, if you even want that. If freedom is just a quickening of the heart before it bursts. You think about the valley, about the years before you learn to take orders and measure days in bruise and coin. Memory is a trickster. The farther it gets, the more it sweetens the past. the more it edits out what you came to hate about yourself. But you remember your father's hands, thick with pitch, and your mother's voice, and for a flicker, you are a boy again, running through the barley, dreaming of cities you could never imagine. A night breeze snakes through the bars, sharp and clean, carrying the distant brine of the sea. The salt air prickles your skin, cools the sweat at your temples. You let your eyelids dip, and for a moment you can almost pretend the cot is your own bed, the walls a fortress against whatever hunts boys in the dark. Tomorrow they'll call your name, but tonight, here in the hush of stone walls and quiet breath, you drift deeper, softer, toward the only peace a fighter truly knows, sleep. Good night.